Good evening there, everybody. Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I'd review this little video that I found to be very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video by the boxing channel known as DontaesBoxingNation, who, of course, I like to review quite a bit because Dante, once again, as I've already told a bunch of people, a lot of the times, a lot of the stuff that he tries to push out there is going to be a lot more politically and racially motivated than what it actually is going to be based on some sort of setting the same standard or some sort of fairness or logic or objectivity. It just is what it is. But this little video I thought was very particularly interesting because, of course, Naoya Inoue, he's been, kind of under the limelight a little bit, both positively and negatively by certain boxing fans. You have certain boxing fans that believe that he should be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. They believe that he's debatably the most skilled fighter on the planet and that he has defeated a multitude of either former champions or champions and that he has been undisputed in two weight classes and that he should have his rightful claim to the #1 pound-for-pound spot. But on the other side of the spectrum, of course, you have certain people that believe that although Inoue is a great fighter, that he just doesn't have that level of competition, that he's fought really a whole bunch of guys that people don't really know and that really are nowhere near his caliber. And I think that the truth is somewhat in the mix of the middle. I think that in a way, once again, it's a little bit hard for me to proclaim him as the clear #1 pound-for-pound, especially when you have guys like Usyk or Crawford or even Canelo at times that are fighting, in my view, legit A-grade level fighters, especially someone like a Usyk recently who just got, 4 wins in a row over guys like AJ Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, and Daniel Dubois. But in a way, I do think deserves his place somewhere within the top 3 to top 5 pound-for-pound. I do think that he belongs there. But once again, it's very interesting. Guys like DontaesBoxingNation who are debating that Terrence Bud Crawford, that he should have been the #1 pound-for-pound fighter ever since guys like Mayweather and Andre SOG Ward retired. He's not going to make the same argument for Inoue. And isn't it very interesting? Because their argument always was that Crawford should be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter because he doesn't duck any smoke and, he's being avoided by the PBC and he looks like the most dominant and skilled fighter on the planet. But he wasn't really fighting anyone legit all the way up until about Sean Porter or Errol Spence Jr., or at least throughout the majority of his fights at 140 and also 147. But listen, what I'll state is this. I do keep the same standard. So in a way right now, in my view, because of the lack of competition, at least when you talk about, in my view, fighting clear A-grade caliber fighters, I don't believe that right now he would be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. Can he become the #1 pound-for-pound fighter? Yes. But I think that in order for that to happen, he would probably have to both defeat Junto Nakatani and also that of a Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez. But DontaesBoxingNation, what he's going to take this opportunity to do is that, and I basically stated this, any non-black fighter that DontaesBoxingNation or some of the LDBC or new media members, when they see a non-black fighter getting potential #1 pound-for-pound acclaim, they're going to go after that fighter. Whether it be Usyk, whether it be Inoue, whether it be Canelo Alvarez, they're going to go after that fighter. And what you're going to see them claim is that they're getting #1 pound-for-pound acclaim because they don't want a black fighter to be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. All this are bullshit. But once again, isn't it so interesting how Dante and some of these other guys will claim that Crawford deserved to be the #1 pound-for-pound all along, even after defeating a whole bunch of bums at 140 and 147. And now Inoue, now that he's in a similar situation, there's no debate about it. Apparently, Inoue is trying to get in the #1 pound-for-pound spot, or people are trying to put him there because they don't want a black fighter at the #1 spot. Isn't that interesting? Once again, how Crawford was in such a similar situation, but once again, they don't seem to have the same standards. But of course, DontaesBoxingNation, he's going to use this opportunity to kind of claim that Inoue is avoiding this one Uzbekistani fighter, MJ, I believe, at the 122-pound weight class. But we're going to talk about that as the video goes along. And listen, what I'll state is this. If you're going to go with the narrative, or you're going to say that I think that Inoue needs to fight MJ, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But if you're going to go as far to state that Inoue is ducking MJ, or that he's avoiding this guy, or that he needs to fight this guy because he's so super talented, if Inoue beats this guy, then you need to give him A-grade level credit. Because let's not play this bullshit game where we say all this stuff about you're avoiding this guy, you're ducking that guy, you're avoiding this guy. And then when they finally fight that guy, they were just another basic B or C grade level fighter that they fought. If you're going to allege all this stuff, then you need to give them A grade level credit. And we all know that Dante, that he does not do that with certain fighters that he needs to tear down in order for pound for pound acclaim. But anyways, let's get into the video. Let's see what he has to say.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So it's been slow motion for Naoya Inoue ever since he beat Stephen Fulton back in 2023. Now, Naoya Inoue, he was supposed to fight Sam Goodman this past weekend, but Sam Goodman pulled out. So Naoya Inoue, he ended up fighting against a very overmatched last-minute replacement. Now, it would almost be understandable for Naoya Inoue to be fighting this level of opposition in his last 2 or 3 fights if there was nobody viable for him to fight in this weight class. But there is. Instead of fighting Yi Jun Kim or TJ Doheny, Naoya Inoue, he could have took the biggest fight at 122 right now, which is against his mandatory MJ Aadal. In fact, according to Eddie Hearn, Naoya Inoue, he has already turned down that fight 2 times, and he's about to turn it down a 3rd time. Eddie Hearn predicts that Naoya Inoue, he would rather vacate his belt than fight the very dangerous, hard-punching southpaw MJ Aadal.
Well, how dangerous is this dude MJ Aadal really? Because if Naoya Inoue ends up fighting this guy, is Dante's Boxing Nation and some of these other guys really going to claim that this dude MJ right here was an A-grade level fighter? No offense, but Dante's Boxing Nation and a certain amount of these other pro blackities and these guys on these channels, they love to do this shit, you know, and they're not the only ones. You know, certain people from other demographics and other channels, they do it as well, where they say that this fighter needs to fight this guy, he's ducking this guy, and then as soon as they fight that guy, then all of a sudden, you know, there's always some sort of excuse. So is Inoue going to get A-grade level credit for beating a MJ Aadal? We all know that Terrence Crawford just recently fought an Uzbekistani fighter with only 12 fights in Israel Madrimov, and that, you know, Dante tried to clarify that, or tried to claim that he was like the next Gennady Golovkin. So is Inoue going to get very similar credit? Even though this dude MJ right here lost to Marlon Tapales just a couple of fights ago, you know, the guy that Inoue had to fight to become completely undisputed in this weight class, and he knocked him out. Now, Inoue, once again, there are certain people that could claim that, well, Inoue should still fight this guy because he's a relatively dangerous fighter, right? But is this really a fight that Inoue is going to get supreme A-grade level credit for? I mean, is this really a fight to where people are going to give him supreme A-grade level credit? If it is, then I'm all for it. But once again, what I'm not for is for people to talk all this shit for this fight happening for a guy that just lost to someone that Inoue just beat a couple of fights ago. You know, one could debate that MJ has lost his opportunity to get the big fight against Naoya Inoue. And once again, if Inoue goes in there, knocks him out, people are just going to claim that, well, he lost to Marlon Tapales anyways. You know, now once again, if you think that that it'll be a little bit different and that he'll get actual credit for it, then I have no problem with it. But once again, Dante loves to go on this shit about how he needs to fight this guy, this fighter needs to fight that guy, but then when the fight happens, he always strips away credit anyway. So once again, I think the way that Inoue looks at it, especially at this guy, he says, you know, this dude sure has a big fucking mouth for being the guy that lost to Marlon Tapales, the guy that I had to get through in order to unify the weight class and become completely undisputed in. You know, and I think that Inoue has been a little bit annoyed by that of MJ's tactics. I think he's been a little bit annoyed, and I think that he believes that, you know, he does not possibly deserve the opportunity to a certain degree because he kind of fucked it up against that of a Marlon Tapales. But, I mean, it is what it is. And that's why I give Inoue A- level credit for defeating Marlon Tapales, because you have so many of these guys that claim that this dude right here, MJ, is apparently the super dangerous fighter. Right, so then why is the Marlon Tapales one that Inoue has not A grade? Because Marlon Tapales was able to beat MJ, you know, in a very good fight. He was able to beat him. And on top of that, Marlon Tapales has decent boxing ability. He's not a guy that's ever going to make top 10 pound for pound, but he was a guy that had decent boxing ability.
Naoya Inoue is straight ducking MJ Aadal. He's been ordered to fight him twice, right? He's had 2 gimme fights now instead of fighting Aadal. And now, well, tomorrow, no, Monday, the WBA will write to Naoya Inoue and they will say, enough's enough. You have to fight Aadal next, or you will be stripped of your WBA world title and you will no longer be undisputed. And watch this now. Naoya Inoue will vacate his WBA world title.
You don't think he takes that?
No way. No way. Watch this now. You can play it back if I'm wrong. And Naoya Inoue is a pound for pound great fighter. Amazing.
You notice how DontaesBoxingNation is showing footage of Inoue being knocked down in the Lewis Neri fight. This dude is such a snake. Like, don't get it twisted, you know. Naoya Inoue is a guy to where, once again, he gets a little bit overconfident. He's a guy that does need to watch out for that, but you can tell the bias clear as day. Like when Terrence Bud Crawford had a 7-5 fight over Madrimov, or he really got knocked down against Aegis Kavalaskas, you never seen any of these same footages or any of these same pictures. This dude Dante is such a goddamn snake. Like, it's ridiculous.
He has ducked Akhmadaliev twice after an order. Now he's getting ordered for a third time. And he will give up his right as undisputed champion rather than make a mandatory defense against Akhmadaliev. Watch.
The world ain't set up for the honest man to succeed.
Champion rather than make a mandatory defense against Akhmadaliev. Watch.
Just to give you guys a little bit of contrast, do you guys remember when Crawford was at 147 before he fought Sean Porter? Do you guys remember when people were actually accusing Crawford of ducking Sean Porter? Because Sean Porter, he became Terrence Crawford's mandatory. Can you guys imagine what would have been said about Terrence Crawford if he decided not to fight Sean Porter and actually decided to vacate the belt rather than fight his mandatory Sean Porter?
Well, Terrence Bud Crawford, I'm not even actually sure if he had to vacate the belt in order for the Sean Porter fight not to happen. Because a lot of the times, once again, certain mandatories, they can get away with not fighting certain mandatories. But anyways, what I personally will say is this. DontaesBoxingNation is making somewhat of a false correlation. The reason why people were criticizing Terrence Bud Crawford for not fighting that of a Sean Showtime Porter, and the criticism was very apropos. It was very what's the word that I'm looking for? It was very relevant at the time, is because Terrence Bud Crawford was claiming that he was not going to get any of the big fights from the PBC, and that all those fighters were quote-unquote avoiding him. And he had a very big trouble apparently getting any big fights against Danny Garcia, Keith Thurman, any of those guys. Well, Sean Porter was the one fighter that they could have potentially fought together, and that would have bridged a little bit of Terrence Bud Crawford having a problem of getting fights with that of the PBC. So Terrence Bud Crawford was one of these fighters that was claiming that he was getting no big fights and that he was getting no opportunities. But then when the opportunity finally arose, he started to turn it down. And he said that he didn't want the fight, you know, because he's not interested in fighting Sean Porter. So people were taking a look at Terrence Bud Crawford and said, well, what the hell are you bitching for? You know, you're allegedly this guy that is getting avoided and getting ducked by all these PBC fighters, but then you finally get an opportunity to get one of the biggest fights in your career, if not the biggest fight in your career at that time, and then you apparently want to turn it down. So are you really for real in what you're stating about wanting to fight these other guys? The thing is about Inoue is that it's a completely different situation. Because in a way, you know, a lot of people are saying, oh, you need to fight this guy that just ended up losing to a guy that you beat just a couple of fights ago. You know, so once again, is Inoue really going to get A-grade level credit? We all knew that Terrence Bud Crawford was going to get A-grade level credit for Sean Porter because at that time, that was looked at as the biggest fight in his career. I don't think anyone would take a look at Naoya Inoue versus this dude MJ and say, wow, this is the biggest fight in Naoya Inoue's career. Naoya Inoue has already fought the two biggest guys and the two biggest names in that weight class, being both Fulton and also that of Dupalis, and then, of course, Lewis Neri. So, I mean, in a way, maybe he doesn't fight MJ, but once again, is Dante or some of these other guys really going to give Inoue A-grade credit for beating someone like an MJ? And if they do, then I'm all for it. You know, if Inoue, you know, if it's counted as an A-grade level win with MJ, then I'm all for it. But if you're just going to bitch, moan, and complain about how this MJ dude, oh, well, we can't really give him that great of credit because he already lost to Dupalis, well, then what's really the point of this fight happening anyways?
Instead, in his next two fights, he fights a TJ Doheny or a Yi Jun Kim type of opponent. Old media would crucify Terrence Crawford. Now, so far, Naoya Inoue, he hasn't vacated the title yet. But my point is, we all know that Terrence Crawford, he would have never vacated his title if he was staying at 147.
Now he's getting ordered for a third time.
Right, but once again, it's a completely different situation. Because when you talk about Terrence Bud Crawford versus Sean Porter, Crawford needed the Sean Porter fight. Because Sean Porter was looked at as clearly the biggest fight in Terrence Bud Crawford's career at that moment in time. It would have not even been close. It was looked at as the biggest name in his career and the guy that would have bridged him into getting big opportunities. When it came to that of an Inoue versus MJ, MJ is a dude that has already lost to someone that Inoue has already beat just a couple of fights ago. Now, of course, is he probably a better fight than a TJ Doheny and obviously, what's his name? A Kim, sure, or a Sam Goodman, maybe. But once again, is Inoue really going to get a great amount of credit, for beating that of an MJ? Is he really going to get more credit for beating MJ than what he did to Louis Neri or some of these other guys? I'm not quite sure if he's going to. Because if Inoue pretty much goes in there and knocks this dude out, they're just going to say, oh, well, he already lost.
And he will give up his right as undisputed champion rather than make a mandatory defense against Akhmadaliev. Watch.
What does he do if not, though?
He goes and fights somewhere else. He's talking about fighting Picasso in Vegas. Who gives a fuck? Excuse my language. As an undisputed champion and as a world champion, you have an obligation to fight your mandatory contenders. Now, sometimes, if it's a no-name, then I understand look at Canelo against William Skull recently. Canelo.
Right, but is MJ someone, once again, that is this huge name? Once again, it's not like MJ was undefeated, and it's not like people have been talking about this fight for years. I mean, some people have been talking about it, sure. But once again, MJ just recently ended up losing to Marlon Tapales. He just lost to him either a year or two ago. So at the end of the day, it's like, once again, people are trying to compare this to different things. This isn't a similar situation. It's not like this is a Canelo David Benavidez situation or Crawford versus Duran Bucenis or something like that. It's not like it's like that. This dude has already lost.
Vacated. That's not, this is the best fight.
And it's not like a Lomachenko situation where he lost several years ago. He lost literally just last year against Marlon Tapales.
In the division. Tell me a better fight at 122 than Inoue against Akhmadaliev. It doesn't exist.
It's so funny because while Eddie Hearn brought up a good point when it comes to William Skull, obviously Canelo wasn't avoiding William Skull when he vacated the belt. But the irony is Canelo Alvarez, he refused to fight his mandatory David Benavidez. And yet, as an undisputed champion, Canelo Alvarez, he had an obligation to fight his mandatories, as Eddie Hearn just said about Naoya Inoue. Canelo Alvarez, he also vacated his WBC belt at 160 when he refused to fight his mandatory Jamal Charlo. So while...
Keep in mind, once again, Canelo Alvarez and Oscar De La Hoya at one point in time, they had sent Jamal Charlo an offer at one point in time before, and Charlo had turned it down. But that never gets mentioned.
Eddie Hearn is making sense when he talks about Naoya Inoue. He needs to say the exact same thing about Canelo Alvarez.
And Naoya Inoue, you're the undisputed champion, and you're going to no longer be undisputed because you've ducked Akhmadaliev now 3 times. Watch this space. He will vacate the title maybe next week. But in the next 14 to 28 days, Naoya Inoue is vacating the WBA title.
Now, there's no doubt about it. The whole purpose of being an undisputed champion is to be the champion of all of the organizations, all of the belts that you carry. That means you defend your title whenever you have a number one contender. This is the whole reason why we have a ranking system. Contenders, they do all of this hard work, fighting their way to the top of the ladder so they can reach the number one spot so they can be guaranteed a title shot. And for whatever reason, Naoya Inoue, he really, really respects MJ Akhmadaliev.
Well, does he really respect MJ Akhmadaliev, or is he really tired of this dude's mouth? Once again, no offense against MJ Akhmadaliev, but I'm getting real tired of hearing from this dude about how Inoue is allegedly ducking him. Like, dude, you just lost to Marlon Tapales just a couple of fights ago. And don't get it twisted. I'm not stating overall that he's not a very good fighter, that he's not a great mandatory fighter. But once again, is Inoue really going to get A grade level credit for this? Because if he's just going to be looked at as a B grade level fighter, what really is the big commotion about? Who really cares? That's why I say, if Inoue, once again, if he's going to get A grade level credit for this fight, then I'm all for it. I'm all for this fight happening. But if people are just bitching and moaning, and then they're going to say, oh, well, Akhmadaliev, he's a guy that, was good, but he wasn't really that great. Well, then what the fuck are we making all this commotion for? Because we already know that Dante's Boxing Nation is not going to say that Inoue beat an A-grade level fighter if he faces MJ anyways. So, I mean, what really is the big commotion for? It's not like this guy is a Brandon Figueroa or a Junto Nakatani or a Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez or something like that. He's very talented. He may be A-, but he just lost to a fighter that Inoue beat a couple of fights ago. To me, Inoue has basically done everything that he needs to do at 122 pounds. Because I'm not really quite sure if he's going to get great credit for beating someone like an MJ anyways. So to me, it's like, what really is the big point in this fight happening?
Inoue, he would be the favorite to beat MJ. But there's something obviously that Naoya Inoue sees in MJ. I mean, let's not forget he also avoided Guillermo Rigondeaux as well. You know, with Inoue planning on fighting in the...
And you notice that Dante's Boxing Nation is now trying to state that that Inoue avoided these fighters. Now, I don't really know much about the Guillermo Rigondeaux situation, but I really doubt that Inoue, quote-unquote, avoided Guillermo Rigondeaux, especially when Rigondeaux, I believe, overall would have been at a higher weight class, more than likely at that particular time. Because I don't think that Inoue was ever in Guillermo Rigondeaux's weight class when he was in those weight classes. So Dante's just making a whole bunch of shit up here.
States this year, a fight against Akhmadaliev, that would make the most sense. I mean, Naoya Inoue, he fought this past weekend, and it didn't create too much buzz. Not too many people are talking about it. So Inoue, he's going to have to decide. Either he's going to take the biggest fight at 122 against MJ, or he's going to move up to 126, where the name...
Or he just waits till Junto Nakatani goes up there. He waits and sees what Junto Nakatani does in February, and then they make that super fight sometime overall this year. That's probably the best decision. And he's going to get a decent amount more credit for beating someone like a Junto Nakatani than what he is someone like a like a MJ. You know, someone who just recently lost to Marlon DePalas. Like, give me a break.
But now, Eddie Hearn, he said that Naoya Inoue, he shouldn't even be on the pound-for-pound list if he's not going to fight the best. He says that he should be kicked off the pound-for-pound list.
If he's not going to fight the best. You hear this dude right here? Naoya Inoue has literally fought everybody else other than that of a MJ. This dude that recently lost once again to Marlon DePalas. Dante is trying to put it in the sense of Naoya Inoue not fighting the best, period. Even though he's been undisputed in 2 separate weight classes as of recently. You see the narratives that this dude is trying to pull out of his ass? Because once again, Inoue is now starting to get #1 pound for pound acclaim. And Dante's Boxing Nation can't have that. So what is he trying to do? He's trying to claim that Inoue is avoiding this guy. And that for some reason that he just won't fight him. Well, maybe he just won't fight him because Inoue realizes that he's not going to get that much credit for him in the first place. And he takes a look at him and says, what the fuck do I need to fight you for? Like, I beat the guy that beat you.
Talking about a pound-for-pound fighter, who's he fought this year? TJ Dehenny and that geezer he's just boxed last night. That's not a pound-for-pound resume. He should be dropping down the pound-for-pound list.
And what I'll state is this. Naoya Inoue, in my view, does not have a very vast or very great resume. Like I said, maybe he has about 3 or 4 A-grade level wins, and even that's debatable. The only for sure A-grade level win that I would give him is that over Fulton. I would, of course, give him the Nonito Donaire win, you know, A-, because Donaire did kind of come back, you know, in that division. He beat 2 undefeated champions or contenders, also had never lost at that weight class previously. And then, of course, I'd also give him Marlon DePalas. Louis Neri, maybe. But, I mean, that's a debate because I really don't see Louis Neri as the most multi-dimensional fighter.
And no one seems to ever question it. It's like, oh, well, it's Inoue. Fucking, so what? And before that, if you actually look at his resume, he boxed Stephen Fulton, don't get me wrong. Good fighter. Didn't look great in his last fight, did he? Got dropped. Scraped to win.
Right, but first of all, Stephen Fulton was moving up in weight for the first time. And on top of that, Naoya Inoue just knocked him out. Like, it's different, once again. It would be different if Stephen Fulton was still undefeated and he didn't look that great in his last fight. But that's not the situation. When certain fighters end up getting stopped, especially, or getting their ass completely whooped, the way that Stephen Fulton did against that of a Naoya Inoue, it completely ruins a certain part of them that was once upon a time there. You know, they don't ever have the same mentality ever again, like what Ricky Hatton had when he lost to Mayweather, you know, or like Adrian Broner when he lost to Marcos Maidana. Fighters, after they lose their zero, are never the same again, especially if you just get your ass completely whooped like that of Naoya Inoue. Now, isn't it very interesting how Dante's Boxing Nation this whole time, he'd be like, oh, well, you know, a lot of these fighters, they don't look that great after Crawford because he took their O away and, you know, they're not the same after Terrence Bud Crawford, right? So where's this thing from, you know, for Inoue? And you guys remember when this dude, Dante's Boxing Nation, when this guy was claiming that Stephon Fulton was top 10 pound per pound, basically because he was just another black fighter that he wanted to put on the top 10 pound per pound list to make sure guys like Canelo and Inoue and Usyk are not there. Isn't that very particularly interesting? Remember when Dante said that Fulton was going to embarrass Inoue, and that if Stephon Fulton were to beat Inoue, that, you guys need to hold the same standards and put Fulton to top 5 pound per pound? Right, so where are these same arguments from Dante? This snake ass. Anyway.
Lewis Neary, who's like, not really, and he dropped him, right? To Parles, okay, he I think, got the wrong decision against Akhmadaliev on a bad night.
The boy that beat your boy Akhmadaliev. But anyway.
So, but I don't know, and by the way, he's brilliant. He's the favourite against Akhmadaliev. But he's the best fight in the division. And I go back to, I don't know, AJ, when the mandatory was called against Usyk. And it's like, no, we're not ducking this because you'll be ridiculed and it's just what you do. And everyone said, don't fight Usyk, don't fight Usyk. And he went, no, fuck that, I want to be undisputed.
Right, but Usyk was undefeated in that weight class, and he was looked at as a guy that was a little bit of we didn't really know where he was going to be, but that still was looked at as a great fight. If Inoue beats someone once again like a MJ, how much credit is he going to get really? Once again, for a guy that just lost to Marlon Tapales a couple of fights ago, people act like this fight is going to create like a huge buzz. It's going to be an interesting fight if it happens, but is he really going to get that much more credit for beating someone like an MJ as what he would than a Marlon Tapales or someone else like that? No, not really. And even most people don't count the Marlon Tapales win as an A-grade level win. So why would they count Akhmadaliev as an A-grade level win either? So that's why to me it doesn't really matter whether this fight happens.
Let's fight Usyk. But why? No one's asking what media out there, right? These guys aren't that accessible, are they? I don't think. Like, you ask me a million questions a day. You when you go and ask a question, who has said to Inoue, can I just ask a question? Why aren't you fighting Akhmadaliev? And he will go, oh, my team is in charge of that. And they go, oh, well, fucking ask the team then. Why? 3 times. Why are you prepared to lose your tag of undisputed rather than fighting? Naoya Inoue, just wondered, are you going to fight Akhmadaliev? Oh, next question. Next question. Take him out the pound. Genuinely, take him out the pound for pound list.
The truth is, old media, they don't want to see Naoya Inoue take any more tough challenges. They were calling him pound for pound the best fighter over Crawford before he even beat Stephen Fulton. So now that he beat Stephen Fulton...
Right, just like how you were calling Terrence Bud Crawford the best fighter in the world before he beat someone like a Spence and was beating a whole bunch of bums at 140 pounds at 147. So don't sit here and try to act like these guys are the only ones that were racially motivated or were trying to put a fighter higher on the pound for pound list of what he actually deserved. Because you did the same shit for several years with Terrence Bud Crawford.
They don't want to see him take any more tough challenges. Old media would honestly rather see Naoya Inoue fight TJ Doheny for the rest of his career and still say that he's pound for pound the best fighter in the world.
Or maybe they just want to see him fight someone that didn't just lose to somebody that he just ended up knocking out a couple of fights ago. Maybe they would rather see him fight Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez or Junto Nakatani, 2 people that actually have pound for pound acclaim. Maybe those are the fights that people want to see. Not this dude that overall has a big mouth but ended up losing his opportunity a couple of fights ago. Maybe that's the fights that people want to see.
This is what they did with Golovkin, and that was before he even fought Canelo. This is what they did with Chocolatito Gonzalez before he even made his debut fighting in the States. The standard is set so much lower for fighters on the hope list. Now, with that being said, Naoya Inoue, he's definitely a special talent. I mean, if you're comparing him to someone like a Canelo Alvarez, Canelo is nowhere near on the level of a Naoya Inoue when it comes to talent. I'm only...
Dante's Boxing Nation hates Canelo Alvarez's guts so much. He always has to find a way to bring up Canelo. But once again, that's how you know that Dante's Boxing Nation, he truly believes that Terrence Bud Crawford is not the king. He believes that Canelo Alvarez is the king. And the reason how you know that is because the standards are set so much more higher for the fighter that is actually looked at as the king. He criticizes Canelo Alvarez constantly because he holds him to a completely separate standard. The things that he asks of Canelo Alvarez, he would never ask Terrence Bud Crawford to do. Like when Canelo Alvarez was allegedly going to move up to the cruiserweight division, he said, well, don't fight Ulango Makabu, fight an Alexander Usyk. Would he ever say, well, Terrence Bud Crawford, it's your first fight at 160 pounds. Don't fight, a bum. Fight, who the hell is that one dude at 160, the Kazakhstan fighter? Yanabek. Go fight Yanabek. Would he say that? Absolutely not. There wouldn't be any of that. Anyways.
Talking about what old media wants. Now, I don't think they're going to get what they want because eventually Naoya...
Well, even old media has talked about certain fights like Junto Nakatani and Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez. So Dante's Boxing Nation is just trying to pull this narrative out of his ass. So once again, he can come up with an excuse to not put Inoue within the top 5 or the number 1 pound per pound. And don't get it twisted. I don't think that he's number 1 pound per pound yet either with the resume that he has. But this little snake in the grass right here, Dante's Boxing Nation, he always tries to pull a narrative out of his ass whenever he needs to, even if it's not the correct or the relevant comparison.
Way he is going to step up and take on another tough challenge. We just don't know when it's going to be. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
But anyways, that pretty much is about it. But I just thought that I would review that once again because Dante, once again, he likes to talk all this shit about how Inoue, how he needs to fight Akhmadaliev. He's just using MJ once again to make Inoue look bad. He knows damn well that if Inoue beats MJ, a guy that just lost to Palas a couple of fights ago, a guy that Inoue fought, and ended up knocking out, he's not going to give Inoue no damn credit for beating no MJ. Once again, the fights that people want to see are Junto Nakatani. They want to see Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez. Those are the fights that people want to see. And the Junto Nakatani fight, according to what I'm hearing, is very close to possibly being made. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Now, the MJ fight would be very particularly interesting, but once again, unless Inoue is really going to get A-grade level credit from a lot of people for fighting someone like an MJ, then that's not really a fight that any of us need to see. Why overall, such the big fuss and muss overall about a guy that just ended up losing to Marlon Palas just 2 fights ago, and someone once again to where if Inoue beats him, is anyone really going to claim that, oh, that was a big name, that was an A-grade level talent? If not, then what's the point of that fight happening? All it is, once again, is to tear down Inoue for some particular reason. Dante's Boxing Nation tried to compare it to when Porter turned down Porter. That was not a similar situation whatsoever. Because Terrence Bud Crawford was talking about all this shit about how the PBC were avoiding him, even though I don't know how the PBC can avoid you when you didn't sign with them. You signed with Top Rank. That was your own decision. A guy that has repeatedly stated that he hates working with Al Heyman and the PBC. That was Terrence Bud Crawford's decision. And then he bitched, moaned, and complained about how he wasn't getting any opportunities. Then an opportunity finally presented itself, and he didn't want to take it. So Crawford deserved criticism when that happened because he talked all this shit about needing opportunities, and then it finally presented itself and he turned it down, or he wanted to. Now to be fair, once again, eventually he did take the Porter fight because he realized that he finally was going to have to put his money where his mouth was, and that, he was going to have to finally live up to the shit that he was talking. Even though I don't think he was trying to duck anyone with the PBC, but he realized eventually that was going to be the step over into fighting an Errol Spence. Inoue, for example, I think he takes a look at MJ, maybe as particularly dangerous, but I think he says that, this dude, for a guy that ended up getting beat by a guy that I just beat, he sure talks a whole lot. And I think that Inoue is more focused on guys like Junto Nakatani, and that's a fight that we would all love to see. That's a great fight. But anyways, we'll see what happens. The MJ fight certainly would be very particularly interesting. I just don't think that MJ is going to give... I don't think that people are really going to give Inoue credit for beating someone like an MJ in the first place. It'd be different if MJ was undefeated, or if he clearly was the main guy that's, that is more talented than anyone that Inoue could fight next. He probably is at the division, but it's also very possible that we could see a Junto Nakatani fight come next. But it's just very interesting how Dante, once again, he tried to put Inoue in a very bad light. And the reason why that is, once again, is because he's getting top pound per pound acclaim. So he has to do damage control. So it is what it is. And he does this with any non-black fighter that is going to be looked at as top 5 pound per pound that he knows that he cannot use to boost some of his favorite black fighters. Like a Josh Taylor or like that of a David Benavidez. He'll use those fighters because he knows that he can either A, use their names to tear down certain guys like Canelo Alvarez or Vasily Lomachenko. But then when it comes to non-black fighters that are looked at as the best within a multitude of weight classes, he's going to tear them down, a.k.a. Usyk, a.k.a. Canelo, a.k.a. Inoue, aka Lomachenko. He's always going to tear those guys down. So this dude Dante, even as much as he bitches about racist and racial motivation, he's the biggest racist out there. But it is what it is. But anyways, we'll see what Mr. Inoue does next, because he is going to have to increase his level of opposition. But I really am hoping that we get to see Junto Nakatani versus Inoue next, because that's a tremendous fight. That's a clear A-grade level opponent in my view. But we'll see what happens. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later, and we'll see where this goes.